The mountain air was crisp that Friday morning as Staff Sergeant Daniel Morrison loaded the last of the camping gear into his Jeep Wrangler. After 18 months deployed in Iraq, all he wanted was this: a weekend in the Sierra Nevada mountains with his wife and closest friends. The kind of normal he'd been dreaming about in those suffocating desert nights when mortar fire kept him awake. "Danny, did you pack the extra propane?" His wife called from inside their suburban home in Sacramento. Her name was Melissa, and at 29, she still had that radiant smile that made him fall in love with her 7 years ago at a 4th of July barbecue. "Got it, babe," he shouted back, adjusting the straps on the roof rack. "We're all set." This trip was supposed to be perfect. Daniel, Melissa, and their two best friends, Trevor and his wife Natalie. The four of them had been inseparable since college. Trevor was the brother Daniel never had, the guy who stood beside him at his wedding, who sent care packages to Iraq filled with beef jerky and terrible jokes written on index cards. But what Daniel didn't know, what he couldn't have known as he carefully packed that Jeep with military precision, was that this weekend wouldn't be about reconnection or healing or celebrating his survival. This weekend would be about discovering a betrayal so deep it would shatter everything he thought he knew about love, loyalty, and the two people he trusted most in this world. The drive to Lake Tahoe took 4 hours. Melissa sat in the passenger seat, scrolling through her phone with an unusual intensity. Every few minutes, she'd smile at the screen, type something quickly, then lock it and stare out the window. "Everything okay?" Daniel asked, glancing at her while navigating the winding mountain roads. "Yeah, fine," she said too quickly. "Just responding to work emails." Work emails on a Friday afternoon, when she'd specifically told her boss she'd be offline all weekend. Daniel's military training had taught him to notice inconsistencies, small details that didn't add up. But he pushed the thought away. He'd just spent a year and a half in a war zone. Of course he was paranoid. Of course he was reading into things that weren't there. "Can't wait to see Trevor and Nat," he said, trying to lighten the mood. "Feels like forever since we all hung out." Melissa's smile faltered for just a fraction of a second. "Yeah, it'll be good." They arrived at the campsite around 2 p.m. Trevor's black Ford F-150 was already there, parked beside a premium camping spot with a view of the lake. Daniel felt his chest tighten with emotion as his best friend emerged from behind the truck, arms spread wide. "There he is! The man, the myth, the legend," Trevor called out, his voice booming across the campsite. The two men embraced, one of those hard, back-slapping hugs that men reserve for brothers. Trevor was 31, tall and athletic, with the kind of easy confidence that made him popular in any room. He worked in pharmaceutical sales, made good money, drove a nice truck, and had always been the charismatic one in their group. "Man, it's good to see you," Daniel said, his voice thick. "I missed you, brother." "Missed you too, Dee. Welcome home." Natalie appeared next, Trevor's wife of 4 years. She was petite with auburn hair and a warm smile. "Danny," she hugged him tightly. "Thank God you're back safe." The four of them spent the afternoon setting up camp, 2 large tents side by side, a cooking area with a portable grill, folding chairs arranged around a stone fire pit. Everything felt normal. Everything felt right. But as the sun began to set and they opened beers around the fire, Daniel noticed something. Small glances between Melissa and Trevor. Nothing obvious, nothing he could point to and say, "There, that's wrong." Just something. The way Trevor's hand lingered on Melissa's shoulder when he walked past her. The way she laughed a little too hard at his jokes. The way they seemed to know where the other was at all times, like 2 satellites in orbit around each other. "You okay, man?" Trevor asked, noticing Daniel's distant expression. "Yeah, just adjusting to being back, you know? Everything feels different." Trevor nodded knowingly. "I can't even imagine what you went through over there. But you're home now. That's what matters." What mattered? But what was home anymore? And why did it suddenly feel like he was the outsider in his own life? That first night, they drank and told stories and roasted marshmallows like they used to. Melissa sat beside Daniel, her hand occasionally touching his arm. But even her touches felt performative, like she was playing a role. Around midnight, everyone retreated to their tents. Daniel and Melissa's tent was spacious, equipped with an air mattress and sleeping bags rated for cold weather. He lay there in the darkness, listening to her breathing beside him. "Mel?" he whispered. I love you, you know that, right?" There was a pause. Too long of a pause. "I love you too," she finally said. But the words felt hollow, like coins dropped into an empty well. Daniel didn't sleep much that night. Instead, he stared at the tent ceiling, trying to identify the unease crawling beneath his skin. Was it PTSD? Paranoia? Or was his gut, the same gut that had kept him alive in Fallujah, trying to tell him something? The next morning, they decided to hike to a scenic overlook about 3 miles from the campsite. The trail wound through pine forests and granite outcroppings, eventually opening up to a breathtaking view of Lake Tahoe's crystal blue water. Natalie walked ahead with Daniel, chatting about her new job as a pediatric nurse. Behind them, Melissa and Trevor lagged, their voices low and intimate. "Your wife seems happy you're back," Natalie said carefully. Daniel glanced back at Melissa and Trevor. "Yeah, she does." "But?" Natalie prompted, reading his tone. "I don't know. Maybe I've just been gone too long. Maybe we need time to reconnect." Natalie didn't respond, but her expression suggested she wanted to say something. Instead, she just squeezed his arm supportively and changed the subject. When they reached the overlook, Trevor pulled out his phone and suggested a group photo. They arranged themselves, Daniel and Melissa on one side, Trevor and Natalie on the other. Trevor set up the timer and rushed to join them. But as the camera counted down, 3, 2, 1, Daniel saw it. In the reflection of the phone's black screen as Trevor jogged back to the group, Daniel saw his best friend's hand brush against Melissa's lower back. Intimately, possessively. And he saw Melissa lean into it just slightly, just enough. The camera clicked. Daniel's blood turned to ice. Was he seeing things? Was his mind playing tricks on him? Or had his worst nightmare just confirmed itself in a 3-second countdown? "Got it!" Trevor announced cheerfully, checking the photo. "We look good." Daniel said nothing. He just stared at his wife, searching her face for answers to questions he couldn't yet bring himself to ask. They hiked back to camp in a strange silence. Natalie tried to keep the conversation going, but it kept dying out. The tension was palpable, hanging over them like storm clouds. That afternoon, while Melissa and Natalie went to the nearby town for supplies, Daniel found himself alone with Trevor at the campsite. His best friend was organizing fishing gear, whistling casually. "Trev," Daniel said quietly. "Yeah, man? Can I ask you something?" Trevor looked up, something flickering across his face. "Concern? Guilt?" "Of course, anything." Daniel chose his words carefully. "Has Melissa seemed different to you since I've been gone?" Trevor's expression remained neutral, but Daniel noticed his friend's grip tighten on the fishing rod. "Different how?" "I don't know. Distant. Like something changed." Trevor set down the gear and walked over, putting a hand on Daniel's shoulder. The same shoulder he'd clapped 1,000 times in friendship. But now it felt like a lie. "Brother, you've been through hell. You've seen things no one should see. It's normal to feel disconnected when you come back. Give it time. Melissa loves you. She talked about you constantly while you were gone." Did she? Or was that just another lie wrapped in the camouflage of friendship? "Right," Daniel said, not believing a word. "Thanks, man." That evening, the women returned with groceries and wine. They made dinner together. Steaks on the grill, roasted vegetables, corn on the cob. Everything looked perfect on the surface. 2 couples, old friends, a beautiful mountain evening. But Daniel couldn't eat. His stomach churned with a sick intuition that refused to be silenced. After dinner, Natalie announced she was exhausted and went to bed early. Trevor followed shortly after, claiming he wanted to read before sleeping. That left Daniel and Melissa alone by the fire. "Come here," Daniel said softly, patting the space beside him on the log bench. Melissa sat down and he wrapped his arm around her. She leaned into him, but it felt mechanical. "Mel, we need to talk." She stiffened. "About what?" "About us. About whatever's been going on." "Nothing's going on, Danny. You're just stressed." "Don't," he interrupted, his voice harder than intended. "Don't tell me I'm imagining things. I've survived too much to ignore my instincts now." She pulled away, her face flushing. "What are you accusing me of?" "I'm not accusing, I'm asking. Have you been faithful to me?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Melissa's eyes filled with tears. Real or performed, Daniel couldn't tell anymore. "How can you even ask me that? I've been here waiting for you, worrying every single day that I'd get a knock on the door telling me you were dead. And now you come home and accuse me of—" "Answer the question." "Yes," she shouted, standing up. "Yes, I've been faithful. God, Danny. What's happened to you?" But if she was telling the truth, why did her voice crack? Why did her eyes dart away? Why did everything about this moment feel like a performance? She stormed off to their tent, leaving Daniel alone by the dying fire. He sat there for hours, staring into the embers, replaying every interaction from the past 2 days. The glances, the touches, the way Trevor knew Melissa's coffee order without asking, the way she laughed at inside jokes Daniel wasn't part of. Around 2 a.m., Daniel heard it. A zipper. Quiet footsteps. Then another tent zipper. He sat up slowly, his heart pounding. Through the thin tent fabric, moonlight cast shadows, 2 figures, one moving from Trevor and Natalie's tent toward his own. No, not toward his tent. Past it, into the woods. Daniel waited exactly 60 seconds. Then he unzipped his tent as quietly as possible and slipped out. The forest was dark, illuminated only by scattered moonlight breaking through the pine canopy. He moved silently, a skill learned in combat, following the sound of hushed voices deeper into the trees. And then he saw them. Melissa and Trevor standing close together beside a massive pine tree, about 50 yards from camp. Trevor's hands on her waist, her arms around his neck, their foreheads touching in an intimacy that spoke of familiarity, of routine, of something that had been happening long before this weekend. "We have to be more careful," Trevor whispered. "He's suspicious." "I know," Melissa replied, her voice breaking. "I can't keep doing this, living this lie." "Just a little longer, baby. Just until the divorce is final." Divorce? They were planning his life without him? Planning a future built on the ashes of everything he'd believed was real? Daniel's vision tunneled. His military training, his PTSD, his rage, all of it converged into a single burning point. He stepped forward, a branch cracking under his boot. They sprang apart like teenagers caught by parents. "Danny!" Melissa gasped, her face white as bone. Trevor held up his hands, but there was no surprise in his expression. Only resignation, like he'd been waiting for this moment. "How long?" Daniel's voice was eerily calm, the kind of calm that precedes violence. Neither answered. "How long?" he roared, and the forest seemed to recoil. 14 months, Melissa whispered, tears streaming. "It started after you deployed." 14 months. Almost his entire deployment. While he was dodging IEDs and watching friends die, his wife and best friend were... "I wanted to tell you," Trevor said, and Daniel couldn't believe the audacity. "But then you kept almost dying over there, and it never seemed like the right time." Daniel lunged. His fist connected with Trevor's jaw with a sickening crack, and his former best friend went down hard. Melissa screamed, but Daniel barely heard it over the roaring in his ears. He was on top of Trevor, fists flying, each punch releasing months of betrayal and pain and loss. Trevor tried to fight back, landing a few hits, but Daniel had combat training and blinding rage on his side. "Danny, stop! You're going to kill him!" Melissa shrieked, pulling at his shoulders. He shoved her off and she stumbled backward, falling hard against a tree. That moment of distraction was enough. Trevor scrambled backward, blood pouring from his nose and mouth, one eye already swelling shut. "I'm sorry," Trevor coughed, spitting blood. "God, Danny, I'm so sorry. It just happened. We didn't mean... Don't." Daniel stood, his knuckles split and bleeding. "Don't you dare say it just happened. You chose this. Every day for 14 months, you both chose this." Melissa was sobbing on the ground, her carefully constructed affair exposed under the moonlight like a rotting corpse. "I loved you," Daniel said, his voice breaking as he looked between them. "Both of you. You were my whole world." "Danny, please." Melissa reached for him. He stepped back like she was toxic. "Don't ever touch me again." Then he turned and walked back to camp, leaving them in the darkness where they belonged. Daniel didn't go to his tent. Instead, he grabbed his keys and his wallet, threw his duffel bag in the Jeep, and drove off into the night, leaving everything else behind. He didn't know where he was going. He just drove, the mountain road twisting before him, tears blurring his vision until he had to pull over at a scenic overlook. And then he finally broke. The man who'd survived 18 months of combat, who'd held dying soldiers and made impossible choices, sat in that Jeep and sobbed like his soul was being ripped out. Because it was. Everything he'd survived, the firefights, the explosions, the blood and death and terror, he'd survived it all because he had something to come home to. A wife who loved him. A best friend who had his back. A life waiting for him. But it was all a lie. A beautiful, elaborate lie that 14 months in the making. How do you survive losing everything when the betrayal comes from the people who were supposed to be your reason to survive? Daniel pulled out his phone with shaking hands. He stared at Melissa's contact photo, her bright smile from their wedding day. He almost called her, almost gave her the chance to explain, to beg, to promise it meant nothing. But what was there to explain? Actions were clear. Choices were made. 14 months of deception couldn't be undone with words. Instead, he called someone else. Someone he hadn't spoken to in months, but who he knew would answer no matter the time. "Daniel?" The voice was groggy but concerned. His older brother, Marcus, a state police officer in Sacramento. "It's 3 in the morning. What's wrong?" "I need you," Daniel said simply. "Can you come get me?" "Where are you?" "Somewhere off Highway 50, near Echo Lake." "I'll be there in 2 hours. Don't move." Marcus didn't ask questions. He just came. By the time Marcus arrived, dawn was breaking over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold that felt obscene given everything that had just imploded. Marcus took one look at Daniel's face. Bruised knuckles, dead eyes, the expression of someone who'd lost everything, and pulled him into a hug. "Tell me what happened," Marcus said quietly. So Daniel did. Every word felt like pulling shrapnel from a wound. When he finished, Marcus was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "What do you want to do?" "I want to disappear," Daniel admitted. "I want to forget they ever existed." "Okay, then that's what we'll do." Marcus drove Daniel's Jeep while Daniel sat in the passenger seat, numb and hollow. They didn't go back to the campsite. They didn't retrieve Daniel's gear. They just drove back to Sacramento to Marcus's apartment, where Daniel could figure out what remained of his shattered life. Meanwhile, back at the campsite, chaos erupted. Natalie woke up to find Trevor's face battered and bloody, Melissa hysterical, and Daniel gone. It didn't take long for her to piece together what happened. "You've been sleeping with his wife?" Natalie's voice was ice. "While he was overseas? Trevor, how could you?" "Nat, please, it wasn't supposed to." "Get your stuff. Now." Within an hour, both marriages had effectively ended. Natalie loaded her belongings into Trevor's truck and drove herself home. leaving him stranded at the campsite with his mistress. Melissa tried calling Daniel 47 times that morning. Every call went to voicemail. Every text stayed on delivered but never read. By noon, she and Trevor sat across from each other at the now desolate campsite, the wreckage of their choices scattered around them like debris from an explosion. "What do we do now?" Melissa asked, her voice small. Trevor touched his broken nose gingerly. "I don't know. Do you still want to be with me?" The question hung in the air, and Trevor realized with sudden, crushing clarity that without the secrecy, without the thrill of forbidden passion, there was nothing between them but guilt and consequences. "I think," he said slowly, "we just destroyed 2 marriages for something that was never real." Melissa started crying again. Because deep down, she knew he was right. 1 week later, Daniel sat in a divorce attorney's office in downtown Sacramento, his brother beside him for moral support. The attorney, a sharp woman in her 50s named Gloria Martinez, reviewed his case with a practiced eye. "California is a no-fault divorce state," she explained. "But given the circumstances, the adultery, the duration, your military service, we can push for a very favorable settlement." "I don't want anything from her," Daniel said flatly. "I just want it over." "Daniel," Marcus interjected, "you own that house together. You've been paying the mortgage while deployed. Don't let her—" "I don't care about the house. She can have it. I just want my freedom back." Gloria nodded. "I understand. We'll file immediately. Given that there are no children and both parties will likely want a quick resolution, we could have this finalized in 6 months. 6 months to legally end 7 years of marriage. It seemed too fast and not fast enough all at once." As they left the office, Marcus stopped his brother on the courthouse steps. "Are you sure about this? About just walking away from everything?" Daniel looked up at the California sky, so blue it hurt. "Marcus, I walked through hell thinking I had something worth coming home to. Now I know I don't. So, yeah, I'm sure I'd rather have nothing and be free than have everything and be chained to a lie." But was freedom possible when the betrayal was carved so deep it became part of your identity? When every memory was now tainted? When you couldn't trust your own judgment anymore? Back at their house, his house technically, though it had never felt less like home, Melissa was packing her belongings. The divorce papers had been served that morning by a stone-faced process server who wouldn't make eye contact. She'd tried one last time to reach Daniel, sending a long text message that took her an hour to compose. "Danny, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know I destroyed everything good in both our lives. But please, can we just talk? Let me explain how it happened, how I never meant for any of this. I still love you. I know you don't believe that, but it's true. What I did with Trevor was a mistake. A terrible, selfish mistake. But it doesn't erase what we had. We can still save this, please. Just give me one chance to—" The message never sent. She'd been blocked on every platform. Desperate, she drove to Marcus's apartment, where she knew Daniel was staying. She knocked for 10 minutes, calling his name, begging him to open the door. Marcus answered instead, his face cold as January. "He doesn't want to see you." "Please, Marcus." "I need to talk to him. I need to explain—" "What's there to explain, Melissa? You slept with his best friend while he was in a war zone. You carried on a 14-month affair. You made a fool of him. What possible explanation makes any of that okay?" "I was lonely," she cried, tears streaming. "He was gone all the time, and I felt abandoned, and Trevor was there, and—" "And you're a grown woman who made choices," Marcus interrupted. "You don't get to play victim here. My brother almost died for this country, multiple times. And the whole time, you were back here destroying the one thing that kept him going. So, no, Melissa, you don't get to explain. You don't get closure, you get consequences." He shut the door in her face. Melissa stood there for a moment, then slid down the wall and sobbed in the hallway until a neighbor threatened to call security. 2 weeks later, The story spread through their social circle like wildfire. Friends who'd known all four of them had to choose sides, though it wasn't much of a choice. Daniel was the deployed soldier, the faithful husband, the victim. Melissa was the cheater, the betrayer, the villain. Their mutual friends cut her off one by one, deleted from group chats, unfollowed on social media. Invitations to events suddenly stopped coming. Trevor fared even worse. His wife Natalie filed for divorce immediately and told everyone why. His reputation in their community was destroyed. Mutual friends wouldn't return his calls. Even his coworkers at the pharmaceutical company started treating him differently after word got around. One of Daniel's military buddies, an intimidating Special Forces veteran named Jake, paid Trevor a personal visit at his temporary apartment. "I'm not going to touch you," Jake said calmly, standing in Trevor's doorway. "But I need you to understand something. Daniel is my brother. Not by blood, but by choice and sacrifice. What you did to him while he was dodging bullets for people like you. There's a special place in hell for men like you." "I know," Trevor said, his face still bearing faint bruises from Daniel's assault. "I know what I did." "Do you? Because from where I'm standing, you destroyed a good man's life for a cheap thrill. Was it worth it, Trevor? Was 14 months of sneaking around worth losing your wife, your best friend, your reputation, and your soul?" Trevor had no answer. "That's what I thought," Jake said. "Stay away from Daniel. If I hear you've tried to contact him, if I hear you've so much as driven past his brother's place, you and I are going to have a very different conversation. Understand?" Trevor nodded, and Jake left without another word. 1 month later, Daniel stood at a shooting range outside Sacramento, putting rounds through paper targets with mechanical precision. Since the divorce proceedings began, he'd thrown himself into physical training. Running, lifting, shooting. Anything to quiet the thoughts that screamed at him in the silence. His therapist at the VA, Dr. Patricia Chen, had diagnosed him with severe depression and PTSD, though she noted the trauma was complex, a combination of combat exposure and intimate betrayal. "You're grieving multiple losses simultaneously," she'd explained during their last session. "Your marriage, your best friend, your trust in people you loved, your sense of home and safety. That's an enormous psychological burden, Daniel." "I've survived worse," he'd said. "Have you?" Because physical survival and emotional survival are different things. You can live through a war and still die inside afterward. Now at the range, Daniel reloaded his Glock 19 and fired another magazine. Center mass, tight grouping, perfect technique, empty. Marcus appeared beside him wearing hearing protection. "How many boxes have you gone through today?" "4, Daniel said, ejecting the empty magazine. "That's over 200 rounds, Danny." "Your point?" "My point is you've been here for 5 hours. When's the last time you ate?" Daniel didn't answer because he honestly couldn't remember. Marcus waited until his brother set down the gun, then said gently, "This isn't healthy, man. You're running yourself into the ground." "What else am I supposed to do?" Daniel's voice cracked. "How am I supposed to process the fact that everything I believed was a lie? That I survived Fallujah and Baghdad thinking I had a life to come home to, only to find out my life was fucking fiction?" "I don't know," Marcus admitted. "But destroying yourself isn't the answer. Melissa and Trevor already took enough from you. Don't let them take your sanity too." But what was sanity when reality itself had been revealed as a carefully constructed illusion? When trust was a fatal weakness? When love was just another word for eventual betrayal? That night, Daniel did something he'd been avoiding for weeks. He opened his laptop and logged into his email, where hundreds of messages waited. Most were from Melissa, ranging from desperate apologies to angry accusations to pathetic begging. He deleted them all without reading, but one email caught his attention. The sender was someone he didn't recognize. Jennifer.Cooper@gmail.com. The subject line read, "You don't know me, but you should." Daniel hesitated, then opened it. Sergeant Morrison, my name is Jennifer Cooper, and I'm Trevor Hastings' ex-girlfriend from 5 years ago. We dated for 3 years before I caught him cheating on me with a married woman. I'm reaching out because someone mutual told me what happened to you, and I wanted you to know something important. This is a pattern for him. Trevor specifically targets married women. It's not about love or connection. It's about the thrill, the taboo, the ego boost of stealing someone's wife. He did it to my brother's marriage before mine. He'll do it again after yours. I'm not telling you this to hurt you more. I'm telling you this because you deserve to know that what happened wasn't about any failure on your part. Your wife made her own choices, yes, but Trevor is a predator who saw your deployment as an opportunity. You survived a war. You'll survive this too. But please don't let this destroy your ability to trust people. Not everyone is Trevor. Not everyone is your ex-wife. I'm sorry for what they did to you. Jennifer Daniel read the email 3 times. A pattern? Trevor had done this before, multiple times. And Melissa, had she known? Had she known about Trevor's history and fallen for it anyway? Or had she been a victim too, in some twisted sense? No, that was too generous. She'd made choices. Active, repeated, conscious choices to betray her marriage. But knowing Trevor was a serial cheater somehow made it worse. It meant Daniel's suffering was just another notch on his former best friend's belt. Another marriage destroyed for entertainment. He closed the laptop and sat in the darkness of Marcus's guest room, trying to process this new information. His phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Danny, it's me. I got a new number because you blocked my old one. Please, I'm begging you, just let me explain. What Trevor and I had wasn't real. It was a mistake that spiraled out of control. You are the one I love. You're my husband. Can we please just talk? Melissa Daniel stared at the message for a long time. Then he blocked this number too. 3 months later, the divorce was finalized on a gray December morning. Daniel didn't attend the hearing. He gave his attorney full authority to represent him. He wanted nothing from Melissa. No alimony, no division of assets beyond what was legally required. He took his personal belongings, his vehicle, and his freedom. Melissa kept the house and most of their shared possessions, not because Daniel was generous, but because he wanted nothing that would remind him of their life together. When Gloria called to tell him it was official, he felt nothing. No relief. No satisfaction. Just a hollow absence where his marriage used to be. You're legally single, Daniel, Gloria said. How does that feel? Like I've been single for a lot longer than 3 months, he replied. Trevor and Natalie's divorce finalized around the same time. Unlike Daniel, Natalie went for blood. She got the house, half of Trevor's retirement account, and the satisfaction of everyone knowing exactly why their marriage ended. Trevor moved to a different city, trying to outrun his reputation. Last anyone heard, he'd been fired from his pharmaceutical job after his extramarital affair came to light during a company ethics review. Melissa remained in Sacramento, but her life had contracted to almost nothing. No friends, no social life. Even her family had grown distant after learning the full story. Her father, a retired veteran himself, had been particularly harsh. You betrayed a soldier while he was serving his country. I raised you better than that. She'd tried dating apps, but every match eventually learned about her past and ghosted her. In a city where the military community was tight-knit, her reputation preceded her everywhere. One evening, she sat alone in the house she'd once shared with Daniel, scrolling through old photos on her phone. Their wedding day, camping trips, his deployment farewell at the airport. In every photo, he was smiling at her like she was his entire world. And she'd destroyed him for what? For excitement? For attention? For the thrill of something forbidden? Melissa opened her journal, a pathetic attempt at therapy she'd started after the divorce, and wrote, I don't recognize myself anymore. When I look in the mirror, I see a stranger, a woman who destroyed the best man she ever knew for someone who didn't even love her. Trevor and I haven't spoken in months. Whatever we had evaporated the moment it wasn't secret anymore. We used each other, and in the process, we destroyed 4 lives. I tell myself I loved Danny. I do love him. But how can that be true when I hurt him so deliberately, so repeatedly? Love doesn't do what I did. Love doesn't betray. Love doesn't lie. I think the truth is that I loved the safety and stability Danny provided, but I wasn't in love with him anymore. And instead of being an adult and communicating that, instead of suggesting counseling or separation, I took the coward's way out. I had my cake and ate it too, until the cake turned to ashes. I deserve this loneliness. I deserve these consequences. But God, I miss him. I miss his laugh, his terrible jokes, the way he'd dance with me in the kitchen. I miss the man I threw away for absolutely nothing. If I could go back, would I change it? Of course. But maybe the real question is, if I could go back, would I have been capable of being a better person? Or was this always who I was? And the affair just revealed it. She closed the journal, and for the first time in months, she didn't cry. The tears had run out. All that remained was the echo of choices she couldn't undo, and a future that stretched before her, empty and earned. 6 months later, Daniel sat on a beach in San Diego, watching the sunset paint the Pacific Ocean in shades of fire. He'd left Sacramento 3 months ago, taking a job as a security contractor that paid well and required him to travel. Anything to avoid the memories that haunted every street corner of his old life. His phone rang. Marcus. "Hey, brother," Daniel answered. "What's up?" "Just checking in. Haven't heard from you in a while." "I'm good. San Diego right now. Contract work is keeping me busy." "Too busy for your brother?" Daniel smiled slightly. "Never too busy for you, Marcus." "Good, because I wanted to tell you something. I ran into Melissa at the grocery store yesterday." Daniel's smile vanished. "And?" "She looks rough, Danny. I mean, really rough. She's lost weight, looks like she hasn't slept in months. She asked about you." "What did you tell her?" "That you moved on and she should too." "Good." "Danny, I know what she did was unforgivable, but I've never seen someone look that destroyed. I almost felt sorry for her." "Don't," Daniel said firmly. "She made her choices. She gets to live with them." "Fair enough. I just thought you should know." After they hung up, Daniel sat with that information for a while. Part of him, a very small, dying part, felt a flicker of something that might have been pity. But mostly he felt nothing, and maybe that was progress. Dr. Chen had told him that healing wasn't about forgiveness or closure or any of those tidy concepts people threw around. Sometimes healing was just about waking up one day and realizing the person who hurt you no longer had power over your present. He wasn't there yet. Maybe he'd never fully get there. But he was further along than he'd been at that campsite, staring at the wreckage of his life under cold moonlight. Could you ever truly heal from betrayal this deep? Or did you just learn to build a life around the wound, careful never to press on it too hard, never to examine it too closely? The question haunted Daniel as he walked along the shoreline, waves lapping at his feet. His phone buzzed again. This time, a text from an unknown number with a 916 area code, Sacramento. He almost didn't open it, but something made him look. "Danny, I know you've blocked me everywhere. I know you don't want to hear from me, but I need you to know something. Trevor contacted me last week. He wanted to try again. Said we threw away something special. I told him to go to hell. I need you to know that whatever I did, whatever mistakes I made, I finally understand what I destroyed. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not asking for anything. I just needed you to know that you were right about everything. I'm sorry it doesn't even begin to cover it, but I'm sorry anyway. I hope you find happiness, Danny. Real happiness. You deserve it more than anyone I've ever known." Melissa Daniel read it twice, then deleted it without responding. Trevor had reached out to her, of course he had. The predator looking for his prey again, now that both their lives had imploded. And Melissa, at least, had the sense to refuse him. too little, too late. But as Daniel continued his walk, he realized something. That small piece of information gave him something he hadn't expected. Closure. Not because Melissa had rejected Trevor. Not because she was suffering. But because it confirmed what Jennifer Cooper's email had told him months ago. Trevor was exactly who Daniel now knew him to be. A pattern, a predator, a man who destroyed marriages for sport. And Melissa had been foolish enough to believe she was special, that what they had was real. They deserved each other's misery. 1 year later, Daniel stood in the lobby of a veterans center in Phoenix, Arizona, adjusting his tie. He'd been invited to speak about his experience, not the combat, but the aftermath, the invisible wounds that soldiers brought home, the betrayal that sometimes hurt worse than bullets. The coordinator, a kind woman named Sarah, who was also a veteran, approached him. "We're ready whenever you are, Sergeant Morrison." "Just Daniel now," he said with a slight smile. "Left the sergeant behind with the uniform." "Fair enough. They're excited to hear from you. Your story, it resonates with a lot of our members." Daniel walked into a room filled with about 40 people. Veterans, spouses, therapists, volunteers. All eyes turned to him as he took the podium. He'd practiced this speech a dozen times, but standing here now, looking at faces that understood pain, he decided to speak from the heart instead. "A year and a half ago," he began, "I thought the hardest thing I'd ever do was survive combat in Iraq. I watched friends die. I made impossible choices. I came home with scars inside and out that I'll carry forever." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "But 6 months after I got home, I discovered something that nearly broke me completely. My wife had been having an affair with my best friend for 14 months, while I was deployed." He heard murmurs of recognition, of sympathy, of shared pain. "I'm not going to stand here and tell you I handled it well. I didn't. I assaulted my former friend. I spiraled into depression. I isolated myself. For months I wondered if surviving the war was even worth it when everything I survived for turned out to be a lie." Daniel looked around the room, making eye contact with several veterans who were nodding. "But here's what I learned, and here's why I'm sharing this with you. The betrayal you experience at home can be just as devastating as combat trauma. And for a long time, I felt ashamed of that. Like I was weak for letting a broken marriage hurt me more than war did." He took a breath. "But Dr. Chen, my therapist at the VA, told me something that changed my perspective. She said, 'Daniel, in war, you know who the enemy is. You're prepared for danger. You're trained for it. But when someone you love becomes the enemy, when danger comes from the person who's supposed to be your safe place, that's a betrayal of your most fundamental human need: trust." Several people in the audience were wiping their eyes. So if you're struggling with infidelity, with betrayal, with the discovery that your life at home wasn't what you thought it was, I want you to know, your pain is valid. Your trauma is real. And you're not weak for hurting. Daniel's voice grew stronger. "But I also want you to know this. You can survive it. Not by forgetting. Not by forgiving if you're not ready. But by refusing to let the person who betrayed you define your future." He told them about his journey. The divorce, the relocation, the therapy, the slow, painful process of rebuilding a life from ashes. "I'm not going to stand here and say I'm healed. I'm not sure I'll ever be completely healed. I still have moments where the anger rises up, where I wonder if I can ever trust anyone again, where I question every decision I made in that relationship. Was trusting people again even possible? Or was suspicion just the price you paid for survival?" "But I'm also here," Daniel continued, "standing in front of you, working, living, building something new. And a year ago, I didn't think that would be possible.